Good evening. First of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's a pleasure and a privilege for me also, because it's very interesting for me to hear every so often what everyone's thinking on those issues at first hand. We have obviously been looking at the sharing economy. It's a very emotional debate for some reason. People get very passionate about it, and there's a reason why. The Commission has, in the Single Market Strategy that it published on 28 October, declared already that they want to get involved. The Commission is getting involved. The declared purpose is to promote the development of the shared economy in a fair and balanced environment. It's one of those expressions that basically leaves everything open to what you want to do next. There are grounds for Commission intervention, and they're mostly not from competition policy, and that's important to emphasize. It's a regulatory issue, most of it all. And the Commission says they will provide guidance on the applicability of the law, and they want to then maybe examine whether there are regulatory gaps or regulatory issues that need to be changed. But what will happen mostly is that there's going to be a look at both the e-commerce directive and the services directive. And why those two? Because the e-commerce directive regulates information society services and platforms, and it says you cannot put authorizations or requirements that would go against the internal market in platforms. That means that if you're a platform, somebody cannot regulate you in a way that you cannot go into a market or in a way that prevents you from going into a market. Now, there's a service directive that says more or less the same thing. If you're a service provider, nobody can put an authorization or a requirement that impedes you from providing the service somewhere else. But there are some services that are excluded from that, and there's something else too, that any sector regulation superimposes basically, it's stronger, is the one you have to obey. So that if you're a transport service, for example, you're not regulated by the service director, but by the transport related regulations. So it's not completely innocuous what you fall. So the question becomes, when you're a platform-based sharing economy entity, are you a platform or are you a service provider? And now that question is a bit in the air, because if you're a transport service provider, then you have to obey regulation. If you're a platform, then you don't. And so I think that's a lot of what the work is going to go, and a lot of and questions like that. So there's a mostly regulatory issue to decide, should we regulate you or not if you're a platform and you're doing sharing economy. Now, this is sort of a very non-competition based work, but then where's competition in all this? Because people say, okay, but they're preventing me from coming into this market, competing with the established services. That is a competition issue. And it could be a competition issue. There are tools in competition policy that you can use for restrictions that basically that regulation be there, either public regulations or private codes or private regimes that prevent people from entering the market. So you have the Article 101 can be used against private arrangements that prevent entry, and it has been used recently at national level, for instance, in Italy against regulated professions, where there was a law deregulating a profession. I think it was accountants, or don't quote me on that one. There was one of those professions, and they maintained the price regulation through the back door, and competition policy was used to break that down. So to allow people coming in and be more aggressive on that market or operate in a different way. There is a possibility also in competition policy with Article 106 to go against the government. So the Commission could go against a member state for a regulation that does more or less the same thing, that gives a special right to an undertaking or a group of undertaking. Now that has been used in I think the latest case was the energy case in Greece, has never been used on the digital arena, but the possibility is in theory there. But now, what is that the solution to break all the regulation? No, because competition policy also allows for regulation or for restrictions that have and efficiency and the public interest also would be covered. So it's not a given that the sharing economy needs to be unregulated to prosper, or needs to be, that we need to take all the regulation out to enhance or allow the sharing economy. There are consumer issues. For instance, if you're in a world of very asymmetric information and you don't know where the risks are going to fall and people are not aware of the risk they're running, there is a ground for consumer legislation. There are grounds for safety legislation. There are grounds for access, sometimes, legislation. So all those things are there. So competition can get at the blatantly special interests legislations or regulations or arrangements, the ones that serve no purpose but to protect a group. Now, one thing that is not or should not be in principle subject to protection is a price-quality arrangement. So it's not okay in principle to say we need to regulate because that ensures the quality of a market. Because in principle, quality is determined by the market. You're not supposed to determine it for the market. The price-quality outcome is something that the market has to, it's for people to decide what kind of quality they want. Of course, we're not talking about water or utilities where you might want to impose the quality, but for other markets, that is normally not public interest justification. Those are the instruments we have. But why? I'm going to come back now to my introduction and my closing remarks. Why is this debate so emotional? Because the sharing economy is different. It is disintermediated, and it allows direct contact between the provider and the user in ways that are very flexible. So it provides a lot of access, both to users but also to the providers. There's a lot of access on the terms that you want. There's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of discretion. You can be in the market the way you want. And that in principle can be very positive, but it also creates a market that is more volatile, that can be more risky, that is more unpredictable. It depends. We don't know yet how those markets we don't know how they will work when they scale up, because now they're relatively not fringe, but they coexist with more arranged. But we don't know what will happen when they scale up. And of course, I think it's in employment where the anxiety is the biggest for exactly those reasons. Those reasons. So I would say that regulation needs to be purpose-based and not choose business models. So if we care about quality, safety, that's a principle we need to have defined. The standards that are needed for public interest, and let people figure out how to get there. Leave a space for private solutions. Some platforms are realizing some of the problems and are solving them in a private way, so they find their own solutions to resolve this. And for the rest, I think we're going to have to wait, because this has the potential to change a lot of how the economy works, and honestly, we don't know what that's going to do.